Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel Biodiversity and Conservation. I'm Subhalakshmi Rao from Ambika Prasad Research Foundation, India, and we are continuing our UGC NET examination series for environmental science subject. And today we are going to study about community ecology and their characteristics. So, communities are the building blocks of ecosystems, and a biotic community is um, consists of populations living in a prescribed area or a physical habitat. It is an organized unit to the extent that it has characteristics additional to its individual and population components and functions as a unit through coupled metabolic transformations. So overall, a community can be described as an all-inclusive entity composed entirely of the biotic elements of an ecosystem, and it can have different sizes and boundaries from the biota of living part of the ecosystem, and they not only have a definite functional unity with characteristic trophic structures and patterns of energy flow, but they also have compositional unity in that there is a certain probability that particular species will occur together. However, the species are to be large extent replaceable in time and space so that functionally similar communities may have different species composition. The community structure includes attributes such as the number of species, the relative abundance of species, and the kinds of species comprising a community. So, if we want to understand about community, we have to understand the various abiotic and biotic aspects of the environment that influence the structure of the communities. And the parameters that define community ecology includes its composition, that is the species present and the relative abundance, then the nature and form of their relationship and its dynamics. So, community ecology mainly is influenced by four major processes like selection, drift, speciation, and dispersal. Selection represents deterministic fitness differences among the species. Drift represents the changes in the species abundance, and speciation creates new species, and dispersal is the movement of organisms across space within a given period of time. So, from the definition of community, mainly some ideas, like three main ideas, can be derived that the minimum property of a community is the presence together of several species in an area, and um, there is also a claim that the same groups of species reoccur in space and in time. This means that one can recognize a community type that has a relatively constant composition, and communities have a tendency toward dynamic stability. That is, the balance or the steady state tends to be restored once it has been upset. Thus, the community shows self regulation or homeostasis. Now, we'll discuss about the general characteristics of community. A biotic community has certain structures or structural characteristics that often is used for distinguishing the diverse communities. And the main goal of studying the characteristics of a community is to look for ways and means to describe a community as well as differentiate between different communities. And there are some structural characters or attributes of a community that are generally analyzed in terms of two main categories, that is analytical and synthetic characters. And the analytical characters are those which are directly observed in the field, and they may either be quantitative or qualitative. And the qualitative characters include the general appearance or the phenology, that is the periodicity of occurrence or of flowering or fruiting, or stratification, their abundance, their um, growth forms, their vitality. All these come under the qualitative characters. And the quantitative characters include the frequency, density, abundance, cover, etc. And the synthetic characters are based upon the data obtained from the analytical characters. They are determined by computing the data on quantitative and qualitative characters of the community. Such characters include the presence or the intraspecific association, or their association index or the index of similarity, or species diversity or their diversity index or dominance index. All these come under the synthetic characters. Community structure can also be referred to in terms of its physical structure and biological structure. The physical structure is essentially what we see when we are looking at a community, and biological structure involves the species composition and abundance, temporary changes in communities, and relation between species in a community. All this come under the biological structure. The biological structure in a community depends on its physical structure also. So both aspects of community structure have strong influence on the functioning of the community. Um, uh, there are some characters or characteristics by which communities have been measured and studied. Like, first one is ecological dominance. This refers to the fact that all species in the community are not equally important. In every community, some plants or animals exert a dominance influence, determining the nature and function of the whole community because of their functions or their activities. And mm, they they are generally called ecological dominants. And an ecological dominant may be defined as a species population that exercises a major controlling effect on the nature of the community. Thus, each community usually contains one or two species populations at producer, herbivore, or carnivore, or top carnivore levels that are recognizable by controlling influence that they exert on the community. These dominant species populations are the members of the community through which a major portion of the energy transfer is affected. And the community or the dominant species are those which are highly successful ecologically and which largely determine the conditions under which the associated species have to grow or live. For example, in a sal forest, the sal trees are dominant, but in a mixed forest, there may be several uh, species that exert their influence on the nature. and we can say that condition as co-dominant. And in plant communities, abundance is rarely correlated with dominance. For example, in a forest, a herbaceous species may be very abundant, while a tree species is hardly so. And in terms of the number of individuals present, but it is the tree species that determine the nature of the community and is therefore the dominant species. Now, the next one is community stratification or zonation. The term stratification refers to layering of habitats within ecological communities. The stratification in ecological communities may be vertical, horizontal, or temporal. The vertical stratification is the biotic feature of most biotic communities, and the simplest stratification in a community includes only two strata or two distinct interdependent zones, that is lighted photosynthetic zone and a dark zone where mainly respiration occurs, and they are divided as autotrophic zone and heterotrophic zone. The autotrophic zone is the photosynthetic zone where the green plants combine inorganic materials and convert them into organic compounds with energy from sun. And it is mainly the photosynthesis is the most active when light, water, temperature, minerals, etc. are at optimum condition or optimally available, and the lack of any one of these resources will limit the growth of the plants. And for example, lack of water limits the growth of desert plants, um, and the lack of minerals limits the phytoplankton in the lakes. So any one of these sources acting as limiting factor may influence the community also. Next is the heterotrophic zone. Here it is a low light zone where mainly respiration occurs, and the organic materials from the autotrophic layer is reduced to the inorganic material for energy, and the inorganic nutrients are released and made available to the plants, and respiration is most active when the organic material, temperature and oxygen are available in optimal conditions. And stratification in a community increases the habitat and microhabitat of various organisms, and it also helps in niche separation. Increased habitat and niche separation reduce competition and thus enable a larger number of species to occupy a community. Next one is species richness. Species richness, or simply the total number of species present in a single number, that goes a long way toward characterizing a biological community. It is defined as the number of species per unit area of land space available, and a number of indices have been proposed to measure the species richness, that is independent of population size. The primary production or the resistance to natural disturbance and the resistance to invasion of other species, foreign species, they all increase as the species richness increases. So there is also increasing evidence that species richness is not just merely a nice way to compare and contrast communities. It is related to important functional attributes of communities. Next one is relative abundance. The term relative abundance emphasizes the relative proportions of different species in a community and is one of the most fundamental aspects of community structure. Um, there are often regularities in relative abundance of species in communities that hold whether we examine plants in a forest or moths in that forest or algae inhabiting a nearby stream. So, if we uh, go through samples uh, of different groups of organisms, one will always come across a few abundant species and a few that are very rare in that area. So most species will be moderately abundant, and in this case, in the picture here, it's shown difference between absolute abundance and relative abundance using two ecosystem types. In case of ecosystem A, we can observe that the green circles depicting a population that is more in comparison with that of ecosystem B. And due to this difference, you can see the difference in the percentage calculation or the relative abundance of that population. In case of no, ecosystem A, the relative abundance was 33%, which decreased to 13% in case of ecosystem B due to decrease of that population um, in ecosystem B. And the last one is species diversity. The term species diversity stands for variety and is defined as how the number of organisms is allocated among the species present. Um, a description of species diversity uses both the number of species, that is species richness, as well as their relative abundance, that is the evenness. So there are some scales of diversity that is used in the study of species diversity, mainly alpha, beta, and gamma diversity. So here the alpha diversity is the diversity of species within an ecological community, uh, which can be described as the measure of two attributes, that is species richness and evenness. And the beta diversity is the diversity of species among the communities, whereas alpha diversity is the measure of diversity of species within that particular community. And thus, beta diversity provides a first approximation of area diversity or regional diversity. And next one is gamma diversity. It refers to the diversity of species across larger landscape levels. In measurable terms, gamma diversity is the product of alpha diversity um, of a landscape's communities and degree of beta differentiation among them. The gamma diversity is used to denote the diversity of different kinds of communities within a landscape, and conceptually, it is the rate at which additional species are encountered as geographical replacements within a habitat type in different localities. And the total number of species of different taxa in the whole world is referred to as global species diversity. And there is also some approaches to analyze the community structure, and community analysis within a given geographical region can be um, done by two contrasting approaches. First is zonal approach, in which discrete communities are recognized, classified, and listed in a sort of checklist of community types. And other one is the gradient analysis approach, which involves the arrangement of populations along uni or multidimensional environmental gradient. So this is all from me today. Thank you.